since late March, after the murder of George Floyd inspired protests nationwide. People in Portland have been taking to the streets. For more than 60 days, the city has been home to one part of the beautiful rising against institutionalized racism and the murder of black people by the police. During this uprising, masses of people have been pushing beyond the limits of protest as usual, tearing down hated monuments to white supremacy, like those statues built of Confederate generals and slave owners. Local authorities and state and city governments run by Democrats have been viciously repressing protests. While they have sent the police in riot gear to shoot rubber bullets, arrest hundreds of nonviolent protesters, and tear-gassed crowds of people, for the open white supremacist fascist Donald Trump, this has not gone far enough.
And the winners dominate. If you don't dominate your city and your state, they're going to walk away with you.
On June 26, Trump signed an executive order that was nothing short of both a fascist tirade against the uprising and a concrete plan to violently suppress it. The order allows protesters to be thrown in jail for 10 years if they are at any demonstration where alleged violence occurs. This order also laid the legal basis for the creation of Operation Diligent Valor, in which federal troops under Trump's direct authority would sweep into Democratic cities to replace the roles of local authorities. On July 2nd, federal troops authorized and deployed by Trump himself invaded the city of Portland to put down the protests, a direct attack on the uprising of millions of people against police brutality and systemic racism. These agents, dressed in camouflage with no identifying insignia, have shot and tear-gassed protesters and carried out military-style operations where feds in unmarked vans snatch people off the streets, often for no reason.
How are we supposed to know who you are? How are we supposed to know you're not kidnapping us and you're civilians kidnapping us?
Dousing unarmed protesters in tear gas and shooting them with rubber bullets, fracturing one man's skull. What's more, this is being done in spite of the fact that Portland's mayor and city council and Oregon's governor and attorney general didn't ask for these forces and are demanding they leave, joined by many other mayors.
They're not wanted here. We haven't asked them here. In fact, we want them to leave.
In fact, Portland's mayor was himself tear-gassed while attending a protest. These deployments are not just an attack on the masses of people rising up, but also on Trump's ruling class rivals, the liberals and Democrats who run the governments of many states and cities, including Portland.
So what are you planning on doing?
Well, I'm going to do something that I can tell you, because we're not going to let New York and Chicago and Philadelphia and Detroit and Baltimore and all of these, Oakland is a mess. We're not going to let this happen in our country. All run by liberal Democrats.
So more federal law enforcement to some of these cities?
More federal law enforcement, that I can tell you. In Portland, they've done a fantastic job. They've been there 3 days, and they really have done a fantastic job in a very short period of time. No problem. They grab them, a lot of people in jail. They're leaders. These are anarchists. These are not protesters. People say protesters. These people are anarchists. These are people that hate our country. And we're not going to let it go forward. And I'll tell you what, the governor and the mayor and the senators out there, they're afraid of these people. That's the reason they don't want us to help them. They're afraid. I really believe they're actually maybe even physically afraid of these people. How about Chicago? Would you say they need help after this weekend? Do you know the numbers? Did you hear the numbers? Many, many shot, many, many killed. This is worse than Afghanistan, by far. This is worse than anything anyone's ever seen. All run by the same liberal Democrats. And you know what? If Biden got in, that would be true for the country. The whole country would go to hell. And we're not going to let it go to hell. Thank you very much, everybody.
The reach of the federal government into local law enforcement, against the wishes of local elected officials, is part of crushing any and all opposition to Trump and his fascist agenda even within the government itself. As federal police tried to make an example out of Portland, the protests grew rapidly to 4,000 people on July 24th. Instead of backing down or going home, this escalation spurred large numbers of people from a variety of ages and very different backgrounds into action, with groups of mothers, fathers, and veterans forming physical barriers with their bodies and courageously standing up against the feds. Protesters showed up prepared, with more protective gear to defend against the violent attacks by the feds and cops, helmets, gas masks, and homemade shields.
I shouldn't have to tell my kid not to wear a hoodie. I shouldn't have to tell my kid be careful of reaching in your pockets when you're walking down the street. My kid should be okay with walking. My kid should love her skin.
Black Lives Matter, that's why we're here. We're not here because of some building. We don't care about the building. We don't care about your stupid fence. It's not about me. It's about Black Lives Matter. There's so many amazing black women who've been doing this fight for years, and I showed up late. I'm so tardy to this party, but I'm making up for it because I'm so angry.
Seeing the wall of moms was so amazing. And, you can't mess with moms. Well, I've been so inspired by watching, but I felt like I was too old to come here safely. And so I've been sending money to for the resources. But the minute we walked in, we saw a wall of grandmas.
So that's why this Vietnam veteran, combat medic, who took injured and dead soldiers off of helicopters, this is why I did this. Back up. Well, I took an oath to defend my country. And then when I got to Vietnam, we committed atrocities. We committed atrocities every single day when I was in Vietnam. I took an oath to defend this government. And when I got to Vietnam, we committed atrocities. I stood next to a ditch in Vietnam, and we murdered 170 Vietnamese people.
On Saturday, July 25th, there were nationwide solidarity marches, which brought out thousands of people in Los Angeles, New York City, Seattle, Oakland, and other cities. In some cities, these protests were initiated by Refuse Fascism, which brought forward the need to not only strengthen the struggle against the federal crackdown and to strengthen the uprising against white supremacy, but to drive out the Trump-Pence fascist regime through sustained mass protest and stop the consolidation of a fascist America. The Revolution Club was also in the mix in several cities, boldly putting forward revolution, nothing less. The situation is developing rapidly, and we will continue coverage on revcom.us and the RNL show in the coming days.